Well, and I told David and some others I'm a walker. There actually seems to be a fairly long leash, so I won't be able to come all the way to the back, but will be able to kind of keep my legs a-moving. Now, Benji, my brother from another mother, I don't know if I'm going to say whoop, whoop, and do something to have you move the slides ahead, but for now, let's do what's that? Yeah, well, I won't do the whoop, whoop then. But we'll follow through here, but to start out with, and I started handing out books. Now, I will apologize in advance that I had no idea we were going to be standing room only, capacity overflow, until the folks I drove over with from South Carolina and Georgia had to be moved to the Hampton Inn. I mean, we really had that many folks, which I actually considered that the Brandon Clay bounce. That's why this room is so filled. I'm here, and everybody's excited. They wanted to hear Brandon Clay speak. But I've got more books. And so Jeff and David are going to help me. I don't want to disrupt things, but I want everybody to have this in front of them, as many as we have. If you didn't get one and have never had one, raise your hand and they'll make their way around to you. Okay? So we've got a couple here, but thank you, David. If you'll pass that down, Benji. Also, the book you're holding in front of you is the first book. And as Scotty mentioned, there's a trilogy. But the book was actually about 360 pages long, and I said, there isn't a salesperson I know that's going to read a 360-page book. So I literally broke it up into crumbs, bite-sized pieces, but I guarantee you will see yourself in the book. And for those of you, as most of you in this room are likely, leaders who build teams, the people you're bringing into this business, whether neophyte, troglodyte, or I don't know, ice cream bite, doesn't matter, most of them are scared. Because when you transition and you're walking into the world of the unknown, even though excitement has a bit of anxiety baked into it, some of them are scared. But their lives are depending on what they learn from you and what they're able to perform in the field. It's all right. Okay, perfect. So, in essence, what I wrote about was my life story. Me as an agent, getting started in the business, looking for a chance to grow and take care of my rapidly growing family. So in many respects, I am Matt, the lead character in the story, but I'm also Leroy. Now, Leroy is actually a living, breathing character. My father-in-law, Leroy Shuffler, he's Guyanese by birth. My wife is Trinidadian Guyanese. And my father-in-law is 80 years old. So I'm like Lee, when it stops being fun, I'm going to stop. But I've seen modeled in my life that the business we're in, you don't have to stop. He goes over every 2 weeks to Trinidad, and they laud and applaud and hang on every word he says. Why? Because it's effective. So what I'm going to do now that we've gotten the books passed out, does anybody not have a book? Very good. Has anybody that I've already given out to read the book? If you don't mind raising your hand high. And I know, and so I've got Scott Shaddy, I've got Kel and a couple of other folks. I know Miss D. Scott, if you would just clap your hands if you enjoyed it. Yeah. Read it. It could be something that simple that will help you build your business. So what am I going to focus on today? As Scotty said, and I'm not going to use this opportunity to stump, at least not blatantly, for Medicare Advantage and Medicare Supplement and Hospital Indemnity, the triumvirate that can actually be added to final expense and help your agents make 6 figures. That was my stump. But as Scotty allowed me free reign, and as he might have said poetic license to come up here, there probably should be a disclaimer on the screen that says, well, the views of Brandon Clay do not necessarily represent the views of One Life America. We'll give you 30 minutes after the session to determine if you want to recant that poetic license. But in 1996, I started as a Medicare sales agent. And I was working for United Healthcare. At the time, it was called United for Seniors. It was the first products United Healthcare had for Medicare. Was I there when the Big Bang happened? Yes. 10 years later, I got called in, and I'd already gone to Cigna to become a director for United Healthcare within the company. Then I went to Cigna, became a regional director. Anybody heard of Cigna? In 2000, they actually exited the market, as did United, as did all the bigger major players for a lot of reasons. Something called the Balanced Budget Act. That doesn't matter if you understand the technicality. What I thought I was going to retire in went away. 2003, I got called back into a local provider-sponsored healthcare corporation, which was the forerunner of chronic illness special needs plans. Not being too technical, but some of you can nod your head and say, yeah, I know what a chronic illness special needs plan is. I might want to sell those one day. That's my last stump for Medicare. But the reality is, in 2003, I went there and did that. In 2006, a friend of mine called me from back in my history, much like the way you called me in a sense. I hadn't talked to her in 6 years, Nancy Martin. She calls me and says, there's this plan I want you to take a look at. I think it's something you need to get involved in. It's a small little plan. We're barely hanging on, but I told him you're the best salesperson that could come in and do this as a leader. And so I went in, interviewed, met, but I was skeptical. And quite frankly, I was running a mortgage business. Little did I know 2008 was coming and the global contagion was going to take that business. But at the same time, I was a business person and successful. So I'd gone in, talked to them, and I literally said, no, I don't want to do it. But then the CEO called me, and we're talking on the phone. And his name was Patrick Hervé, Frenchman. Can you imagine a man with the southern accent that I have talking to a Frenchman with a really thick accent? But we started to understand each other. And he says, Brendan, I need you to come in and lead this company and lead sales. He says, that actually sounds a little more like a Latin lover, actually, but sorry, it just comes out. It's just in there. But I literally turned to him and he said, we're not going to make it if we don't have revenue. And he said, so I need you to come in and lead. And I said, well, you know, Patrick, it's a compelling argument now. And I'd love to come do it. But I'm not coming in to lead. I'm coming in to start a movement. Took the job. One of the first things I got to do after meeting Scott and a few of his cohorts is I got to go down to Metter. Benji, Eric, Jamie, and the crew that was down there at the time. 2007. And I literally told the story. I go back now, almost a decade later, and there are 3 agents, I won't call their names, who said, you changed my life. Because the day you explained what you were doing and how I could do it, everybody else had talked to me about it, and I said, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it. They got it. I went to the United Healthcare kickoff meeting in Arizona a week ago, 3 days in Arizona. Did anybody by any chance go to that in Arizona? Just looking for a hand, not one. Okay, very good. No more stumping. No one went to see United Healthcare's kickoff. But I'm there. And I'm seeing more people, FMOs, MGAs, and other groups who said, what you did when you came to see us changed the way we did business. And I said, because you joined a movement. So what I'm going to talk to you about today in the time that they've allotted, poetic license notwithstanding, is everybody in this room, even though the theme of this meeting is about leadership, if you really, really, really want to transform your business, you've got to go beyond leadership and start a movement. Benji. So the bones of an organization. There are 2 things that build any business when you distill it down to its simplest forms. The first of those is the people. The second of those is the, boy, you're good. You ought to be scared if you're reading my mind. You get out of there, Benji. But the people and the process. And when you look at what your life is and what your business is, particularly in the business we're in, we're recruiting. But then we want to recruit and get them into the lead system and then the ABCs, and then they got to get into agent tracks, and then they got to learn the carriers. They got to contract through Surance Bay. There's process. There's things that are rigored that you have to do to run an organization and have some level of systematic rigidities where there's repeatable and it's scalable. Because that was the thing that happened. Even if I go back to that story a bit, when we started that movement, we were barely making payroll. In 6 months, we became the fastest growing chronic illness special needs plan in the country. And within a year, we were the largest chronic illness special needs plan in the country. Yes, beating United. Yes, beating Humana. Yes, beating any other name you could have mentioned. Why? Because they were trying to teach people to sell when I said, no, 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 we're going to create a movement. It's a funny thing, when you don't have money and resources, you've got to have ingenuity and innovation. And when you realize that every person that touches you that says they're even halfway interested becomes a vital, precious commodity versus let's throw the spaghetti and hope and pray they sell, all of a sudden you take people above process. So the question I would ask you is, where do you spend most of your time? And I'll use the word leader in movement, not so much synonymously and not certainly to detract from what you do, because every organization needs leaders. But at the end of the day, if I say Apple to you, what would you say to me? Steve Jobs. And I understand that Tim Clark is there, and he's Tim Clark, right? Yeah, it's Apple. Great job. But you are reminded of Steve Jobs because it seemed like the movement of technology came under his purview. And in some cases, they don't even have the best technology or product, but it's who you know, it's the movement they've created. So we're going to look at how you lead and begin to build that movement, something that's more sustainable for you. So where do you spend most of your time, in the process or with people? Which one requires more effort? If you're process focused and you're always looking at how the process can be improved, process improvement, QI, spending time looking at how the leads are distributed, how the metrics are, what's the touches, what's the close rate, what's the return rate, all of that's important. But as you're doing it, you're actually missing the part of the equation that actually requires less effort over time. And that's if you are people focused. You know, I've got on a watch, not to impress you, but it's fancy. As I move my arm, what is it doing for itself? It's recharging, it's winding, and actually, for those of you that are wearing a Rolex, it says perpetual. It means that once it starts moving, and it creates a movement, which is what it's called with a watch, the energy that it takes to move actually gives it the energy to sustain itself. If I actually have, just to use a quick example, if I take an agent and I use the term adopt and prop, I'm going to adopt you. So I've got Mike. And Mike, I'm Brandon. I adopt Mike, teaching him all I can teach, developing him the way I can develop him, and then I prop him up. I adopt him, and then I prop him. When he's propped up and he feels comfortable and confident with what I'm having him to do, how long do I have to be with Mike? He's self-sufficient. He's a self-perpetuating person. And I didn't focus on the process, I focused on what he needed. Now, sometimes that takes more energy, but as we'll get into, it reaps so many more dividends, because when a quartz watch starts to not run right, we replace the battery. But with a perpetual movement, a watch, you simply move it and it starts to run on its own. That's a lot more sustainable than something that you have to watch, change, and process, manage continually. Both are important, but I would tell you that if you put more effort into the people side, you're going to reap better results. So 4 steps. See, there's always 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. 4 steps to creating a movement. Step number 1, everyone leads. That's a scary notion. If you say, well, you mean to tell me, let me give everybody and empower everybody in my office to lead? Yes. Actually, if you don't mind, Benji called me the other day on my way actually to Arizona to UHC, planes flying over, buzzing. Benji calls. Benji Crooms is a VIP in my life. I pick up the phone. And Benji started telling me about a situation, and he says, well, I don't want to step on any toes. I want to make sure I'm in the view of protocol. And I literally said to him, man, if you're with me doing what I would have done, I want you to do it. Because number one, that multiplies the effort. Number two, that empowers him to be able to make decisions, so to speak. And Benji's his own man and he knows what he's doing, but at the time, it was something that he knew I was going to be engaged in. But in that moment, I said, man, please, as a matter of fact, get him back on the phone and tell him I said blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, Benji's like, well, don't send me out there like a sick'em dog. But at the end of the day, it multiplies the effort. But everyone leads. So go ahead to the next piece here. Take the lid off your folks. Everybody knows John Maxwell talks about leadership ability determines a person's level of effectiveness, and he calls it the law of the lid. How many are familiar with his concept, law of the lid? Which means that if you've got a 4 leader in a 3 organization, you've got somebody that can really, really run because he knows enough to do what a 3 organization requires. But if I've got a number 4 leader in a number 8 type organization, they're not really as gifted as they need to be as effective as I'd want them to be. But for each one of the people on your teams, they have something where their number matches or exceeds what you need them to do. But because you're process focused, and I understand about discipline and rigor and having to wake them up at 8 o'clock, get them out there on their leads, let me make sure you follow up, I get that. But if I take another step back, each human person wants to develop to a point where they have a level of sovereignty and autonomy around how they govern their day. If you take a level 4 person and your organization is a level 8, you empower them to make the decisions up to a 4. And I know you're like, well, how do I quantify all of that? How do I make sure that I'm not giving somebody more than they can handle or I'm endangering my organization? That then comes next. This is an example I did. You have to let go my ego. Any Star Trek fans in the house? I mean old school Star Trek. I'm not talking about Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, and that crowd. I ain't talking about Cisco, and I'm not talking about Picard. I'm talking about William Shatner. I'm talking about Leonard Nimoy. That's the Star Trek I like. But in The Wrath of Khan, if you remember, Admiral Kirk had been promoted. Anybody seen The Wrath of Khan too? Ricardo Montalban as I'm doing my, yeah. So The Wrath of Khan, I'm going to do it anyway, even though your hands didn't go up. I know most of you have seen it. But The Wrath of Khan, Admiral Kirk has to take over the ship via a training exercise. He goes to Captain Spock, and Spock was a captain at the time, and he says, Spock, I've got to take over the ship. I hope that doesn't bother you. He didn't really say it quite that way. But Spock says, you presume from a false assumption. I have no ego to bruise. They realigned the way the mission was structured. A level 8 leader stepped into a level 10 environment because of the Kobayashi Maru and all the low wind scenario stuff. But Spock took a step down because the situation required the most extreme leader possible, which is actually the first precursor of a movement, is that someone who is sometimes greater is willing to become lesser. And the only way anybody can become lesser is if they first remove ego and then understand that the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, and that what's going to happen resulting of taking what perceives to be a step backward is actually for the entire thing to do what? Move forward. Then there was another thing he said when, in that same exchange, and I love this too, so I'm just going to add it in, where Captain Kirk said to Spock, how are these new recruits going to fare? We got 50 new people. I drove 7 of them across Georgia's Alabama, Mississippi line, and they're excited, but they are scared. They're over there right now. Some of your people that you brought here, Barry Barnett in this house, Barry Barnett had me beat by about 5 or 6 names over there, but Barry Barnett brought a crew, a wrecking crew. But he brought them because he knows they're going to get tapped into something. That's, again, the law of the lid or the movement. It doesn't always have to be Barry that does the talking. They come here, they learn, they tap in, and he reinforces and develops. But I'm going back. They're over there now, scared, wondering what's next. But then Captain Kirk said to Spock, how are the new recruits going to fare? And this is one of my favorite lines of all time. As with all living things, Captain, each according to their gifts. You got some gifted people around you. that you suppress their gifts because you haven't empowered them through the law of the lid to even operate at the level of leadership they could operate in. Sorry. But you've got people who want to express those gifts, and there's nothing worse than having your gift unnoticed, suppressed, or even worse, dismissed. The movement begins where you end. When you stop trying to do all of it, the movement can take over. Let them grow. To let them grow, you have to let some things go. This is what I did when I was starting the movement back in the day. And because you know the name, this is Susie, and this is a speech I give. I literally sat my managers down and I said, for half, 50% of every decision you're going to make every day, think like you and make the decision. 50%, don't come to me. Think like you think, do what you would do, and make the decision. For a quarter of your decisions, think like me. What would Brandon do? WWBD. What would Brandon do? I think we should get bracelets with that, right? I think we'd have a movement that we could get started with that one. What would Brandon do? Think like you think I would answer it, and answer it. So as a leader starting a movement, I've just taken 75% of what they would normally come to me with and not have to deal with it. Now you better be ready to be accountable and responsible for the decisions you make, but the only way to get someone to exercise a decision muscle is to allow them to make them and, quite frankly, pay the consequence of them or reap the rewards and the benefits of them. The last thing I told them was that for 1/4 of those decisions, come sit with me and we will collaborate. Because in doing that, they get better insight into how I really think, but then also I'm only really dealing with big decisions. And it was through that methodology that it freed me up to go and do all the other things it took to do to get that movement to groundswell. Because some of you right now are stuck in your offices solving small problems. Somebody say amen.
Amen.
Your real highest and best use, your gift, is to be out making things happen. I'm part rainmaker and part rain man. Those of you that know me know what I mean. There's 37 matchsticks in that bottle. I'm a little off. I'm a little trivia driven. I tend to go tangential. I think I just did it. I'll come back to the center. The reality is, you're supposed to be rainmaking for your business, starting movements versus answering the smallest of problems, where if you empowered your people in some fractional method, you'd be able to get more done. Consensus. Everybody say consensus. Consensus. I know I've been sticking on this Latin and Hispanic theme. And if I say con, chili con carne, vaya con Dios, it means with. In the simplest. Laugh me down now. I'm up here representing. I'm bilingual, girl. Come on now. But con means with in its simplest form. If I say census every 10 years, what does that mean? People. Counting people. So if I say consensus, it means with people. Some people think consensus means, well, I got to give up half of my ideas and I got to take half of their dumb ideas and then we got consensus. Kumbaya, let's sing. No, consensus means with people. And I just said it back in the back of the room to Jay, talking about Napoleon Hill. Anybody thinking Crow Rich? The Mastermind Alliance. If I get 6 people in a room, I got a 7th brain in the room. And if you have me in the room, there's 8 brains. But the reality is, when you bring people together, the things you didn't think about come about. You get things that you would not have known otherwise because you are building with people where everyone agrees. And I know that sounds dangerous as well, but stick with me. Benji. What to expect? I agree. What are those 2 things? They're the building blocks of with people. Consensus. What do I expect? What do you expect? What can I do to help you, or will I do to help you? What will you do to help? Do we understand one another? And do we agree? How many people have brought their last agent in and they understand all of that? It's a tough thing to performance manage somebody in a corporate environment like I've had to do when you haven't told them what they're supposed to be doing, how it will be measured. I have had to look 50, 60 people at a time in the face and said, you're going home. And I'm still friends with the majority of them right now. Why? Because at every level, we had built levels and layers of consensus. When you're firing somebody for performance management, hey, Lisa, you knew what the goals were. We've worked to try to get you going. It just didn't work. You agreed to all of this, understood, and we upheld our end of the bargain. You didn't. I know, Brandon. I feel bad for you having to fire me. That literally happened. And that's not, in a sense, anything I feel great about, except she knew all along the line what it was going to take. And even by her own admission, she said, I didn't do my part. But in an environment where people don't know what to expect, what you're going to do, what they're supposed to do we understand, do we agree? You don't have an agreement to proceed. And even in the Bible thing, it says where 2 or 3 are gathered, there I am, especially if they're in agreement. Story I always like to tell is we had a big boardroom of executives. These are guys making $1 million, $100 million, $1 billion decisions in a couple of cases. And the toughest decision every day to agree on was, where are we going to lunch? That's a tough one. Always a tough one. So we have to build consensus by getting these things lined up. But when you build consensus, you have people that are not only bought in, they contributed to what the system is. Okay? The voices of many create unstoppable power. Actually, I'm going to do it. I hadn't thought about it, but my other Star Trek line in that same Wrath of Khan is, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. When you get people in a movement, the many voices become unstoppable. And this is absolutely, besides Philippians, which we'll talk about, one of my favorite scriptures in the Bible is Genesis 11:6, and it's the Amplified. And the Lord said, behold, they're building the Tower of Babel. The people are one people, and they all have one language, which signifies consensus, which signifies agreement around expectation, the various roles. We got bricklayers, we got people that carve stone. We had everybody doing their role up to the law of the lid regarding their strengths and what their gifts and skills were. And he says here, they're one people, they have one language, and this is only the beginning. I sent Scotty and Scott a little video when I decided I was going to take this on, and we hadn't done it for wide publication, nor was it designed to be. It was designed for them to see that I was serious about what we were about to engage in. And the video literally started out by saying, one life, a new beginning. Remember that? The little tree and all that stuff coming up? Because here's this. This is only the beginning. Some of you 12 months from now are going to say, man, Brandon said he was going to start a movement, but little did I know he meant it. I love starting from nothing, so to speak, and to be able to create a movement. So here it says, nothing they have imagined they can do will be impossible. When you get people in the movement mode, agreement, consensus, everybody agrees, what your business will become is off the charts. 80-20, everyone matters. Now I'll admit, I've used this before, and I struggled with whether I'd keep the language there. Some of that's a shame that I have to even say that. Because I'm not one that thinks about division, one life over another life. All lives matter, yeah, I get it. But I said, nope, for the purpose of this and what my intent is, I'm going to leave it. Some of you understand what I'm referring to. But everyone matters. Everyone matters. Everyone matters. 80-20, stay there just for a second. Benji? The 80-20 principle. Who can tell me what it means?
80% of your business comes from 20% of your sales.
Absolutely. Wilfredo Pareto, actually an economist, derived that law, and in most respects, it is almost infallible, immutable, and irrepressible in the sense of that it plays out. But would you go in that room and tell 40 of those people they're marginal? That's what Pareto is saying. I'm going to get 80% from 20%, so let me focus on the 20%. Let the big dog eat. Yeah, we give out the awards to recognize our star guys. And having been one, I love that stuff. But there was something about me on the playground when Steve Noble, and I just said his whole name, he was a crybaby, everybody picked on him. We're playing kickball, J.W. Arnold in Jonesboro, Georgia, and I get to be a captain. Now, I was an athlete. I know that doesn't surprise anybody. I mean, I just look agile and got, but look, come on, Ted, come on up, baby. I'm sorry, Ted, But I picked Steve Noble first. I don't know what it was. It was always something about me, not even the underdog syndrome. It was just like, that's just wrong, and he gets last just by default. I can't stand anybody to be marginalized in any respect. So when you tell me Pareto, I'm like, movements don't get Pareto. You don't have the luxury of using Pareto if you're creating a movement. Because why? Everyone matters. Benji. So the paradox of Pareto. Here's the salesperson that's frustrated, down and out, entered with excitement, leaving with disappointment. I've been trained, but I'm still not selling. Others are selling, so there must be something wrong with me. And then the sales manager, I dare not depict one, it might have looked like one of y'all. We trained them, and still they don't perform. Others are selling, so there must be something wrong with them. In this scenario, they performance manage or simply fire. And I am a believer, as you'll see in the book, that most people, you know what, if you don't want your 80%, send them to me. I'll create an agency of 80%ers. And within 6 months, we will be kicking your behind. Why? Because almost every human being, everyone matters, is just one critical ingredient away from some level of success. Think about your own life, as we'll do it now. Hit me up. Train them, then teach them. And there's a difference between training and development. Most of you have one of these two stories. And you can raise your hand if you would. I was thrown to the wolves, but I made it. How many would that be their story? Eric? Yes. How many would say, though, at the moment I was ready to quit, somebody mentored and developed me and threw me a lifeline? That's the reality that we're facing. And if everyone matters, you've got to throw everybody some type of lifeline of development and mentoring. And yes, there's only so much of you. But after you've mentored someone and they've become successful, guess what the first thing they want to do? Pay it forward. Give it back. In the book, I have a Matt who is taking a sales job in insurance, straight commission, out of desperation because he lost the job that he had with a Fortune 50 company during the global contagion back in 2008. And he literally thought to himself, well, I'm just going to keep this job long enough until the market rebounds and then I'll go back and get the security of a safe job. But as that wasn't happening and his savings began to dwindle, he literally got so desperate he started going around and asking people, top producer, will you mentor me? And the top producer says, I don't have time for you, newbie, get out of my face. The manager he went to said, I've got my own production I've got to do, and I've got 10 other new recruits, I don't have time. He then went to this old man who comes to all the meetings, who had been with the company a long time, who would shake hands with the president, and everybody seemed to know him, and it was Leroy. And he says, would you teach me something? And in their exchange, which you'll have to read, they connect, and it takes him through. What does that remind you of? And it was purposeful. The Good Samaritan. First time he's in a ditch, bleeding, near death, the person who believes like him looked over it. The person who looks like him walked across on the other side. It ended up being someone that in a traditional sense he would have never had interactions with that saved him. When I say everyone matters, you've got to take a look around your organization and say, what can I do for this person that may seem non-traditional, that may seem the standard answer, but if I help them and get them up and running, that's going to help my business, yes, but more than anything, it's going to get them running. Okay, Benji. So then finally, step 4, everyone talks. And you can step ahead there. Positive mind, positive vibes, positive life. And I know Scotty talked about resetting and about having that positivity, and I tend to be a little bit over the top. As a matter of fact, positivity is one of my 5 Strength Finder strengths, so it's just innate, it's inherent. But we draw people to us based on the environment we create. So if I'm trying to create a movement, but my environment is toxic, it's non-inclusive, it doesn't build consensus, it doesn't have people engaged, it doesn't train, it doesn't develop, it doesn't mentor, then how am I going to bring someone to me? So the questions to ask is based on your environment is why would someone want to come work here and join my movement? Number 2 is what will it take to make them stay here? How many of you have agents that the moment they can get another 5% in their contract leave you? And how many of you have had agents that say, in spite of the fact that I could be making 10% more, I stay with you? That's a symptom of you having created a movement. You might think it's just simply a good relationship, a good partnership, but no, somehow somebody saw something bigger in the picture you painted to, in essence, take a step back from ego and a step back from opportunity, a step back from money to remain. And we're already seeing lots of that where people want to partner in such a way as a movement that they're willing literally to do something lesser to do something greater. So what would also then finally make them stay here, but what would make them spread the word? Benji. So what would make them spread the word? It's your culture and environment. And to recap, that starts with everyone leads. Give more responsibility. Hold people accountable, but give them the latitude to do the things they have to do so that that feeling of freedom and autonomy, because look, the reason people join sales, and I talk about it here, are for 3 things ultimately. Emancipation, free at last, free at last. Gratification, they feel good about it. Have you ever really helped someone solve a problem or meet a need or a desire and it feels good? Then the third, to keep the alliteration going, remuneration. And for those of you that don't know, besides Scotty over there in the corner, means money, 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 money. If I'm free, if I can feel good, and if I'm making money, this is the best job in the world. And I'm with Lee Mowry. I'm hanging in here till the teeth fall out, till the knees buckle down. But if I can tell you, I can help you sell some Medicare. Because I'll join Care Improvement Plus. They'll give me some teeth, right, Jamie? They're going to have to take, they're going to, like Charlton Heston, they're going to deprive this mic from my cold, dead hands. We are in a fantastic business. And if everybody leads, everyone agrees, and everyone matters, you go from having to manage a block, build an agency, to starting a movement. That's what I want to do. When Scott Glanton called me 6 months ago after not, or 2 months, I say I'm losing, 2 months ago after not having talked to him for 6 years, I was literally, I'll do it, I was whiteboarding around how I was going to get back into this side of the industry, because I've got other things I'm doing and I'm having a great time. But I had a wasted asset of intellectual knowledge and the ability to do things like this and build movements that I wanted to re-engage, but I knew it would take a special partner who didn't want me to just come in and be the corporate guy. I turned down 10 of those jobs already. I wanted to go somewhere where I could be part of something special and where I could be the catalyst, the pebble in the water for the side of the hemisphere that Scotty's given me the poetic license to run, a movement. So I'm going to do this last little plug for this thing. Your guys, as I know the room is diverse, but if they become final expense experts, it's a shame that they're not selling Medicare Advantage and Med Subs, because they're losing money. And it's a doggone shame that they're not plugging the gaps of the high Part A deductibles with hospital indemnity. And then what you do is you take someone who's struggling to get final expense done right, who might actually be a good one ingredient away from being able to market zero premium Medicare Advantage and become a rocket scientist with it. And then when they get some confidence and some money to pay their mortgage, so like Aaron and Matt, they're not worried about life, they're going to come back to this one. All I'm trying to show you now is that if you look around the kaleidoscope of the people you have around you on your teams, there is a solution. They came because they wanted something and then didn't find it. And did they not find it because it was hidden behind the door of process? The locked door of process. So next slide. I'm challenging everybody right here, right now, to start today. And I know a lot of what I'm saying seems somewhat philosophical, which it is, but there's an underlying business principle with every element of it, because my number one strength finder is strategy. Once we start talking about the philosophical, then we get down to the brass tacks. Now we're going to get tactical, granular, down to the ground. So I would challenge each one of you today to think about 3 things you could do to change the way your organization works, to turn it from you being the leader to you being the person that starts the movement. I almost broke out into Michael Jackson, Make a Change, but I just decided, no, I'm going to hang on. Game time decision. I decided, no, I'm not going to do it. Even though back in my day, I used to be a Michael Jackson imitator. I had a long head of hair. I was much slimmer, and yes, I could do it. No, D, not going to happen. So with that, if everybody would just stand for just a moment, that way you'll get to stretch your legs. I'm closing my portion of this right now. I love this company's name, One Life. I could say every life matters, everyone matters, but we all have one life. Somebody you recruited, somebody that came to you wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to do something, needs you to step down off the perch just for a minute and give them what they need to have a chance of success. In Volume 2, Scott Shaddy, it's on the way, only cost you a Chicago pizza slice. In Volume 2, it talks about what a responsibility is for a leader, a company owner, what they owe everyone that comes to their organization to be part of the company or the movement. You owe them simply authentic access to success. Access to success. That's what they came to you for. To get plugged into something that would change their life. Imagine somebody coming and saying, I'm wagering my living on being connected to you. I'm wagering my mortgage on being connected to you. I'm wagering, and yes, Lord, I know, my marriage on being connected to you. And if everyone matters, you will do whatever was in your power. The Bible says, do good unto all men, but particularly those who are in the house. Close. Paraphrase. Do good unto all men, particularly those who are in the household of faith is the final word. But if they're in your house, you're supposed to do all you can do. With that, I challenge you. Take leadership to a higher level. Start a movement. I appreciate you. Thank you. Look forward to meeting with you.